Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media, where today we are decoding Trump tweets of July 22nd.
I'm so honored to get a chance to do this again. We have checked the trip code. It does appear to be consistently from the one and the only Donald J. Trump, the person who actually makes the best drops ever.
In fact, as we said in yesterday's video, there is only one.
Yeah, that's right. And he is the Highlander.
Okay, so congratulations to Judicial Watch and Tom Fitton for being successful in getting the Carter Page FISA documents. As usual, they are ridiculously heavily redacted, but confirmed with little doubt that the Department of Justice, and that is in quotations, and FBI misled the courts. Witch hunt rigged a scam.
This is such huge news, and it's not even on the top of Drudge or Breitbart. They're still talking about Russia. Let's remember that it was Hillary's out there in her moo-moo talking about Russia. 45 minutes about Putin at her last talk. Why? Because that's still her most vulnerable point, Uranium 1. And if she intends to run, we have to try to completely wipe out of people's minds that she pushed the reset button with Obama's permission, of course, and basically made Putin and the Russians a member of NATO. The sanctions, matter of fact, they were so nice, they let them take Crimea, they let them take parts of Ukraine, they let them mess with the Ukraine oil, on and on and on. So when it comes down to it, it really is Hillary Clinton that is the problem here. Now, Tom Fitton is stronger than the entire Congress. He's stronger than Devin Nunes. He's stronger than the congressional oversight of the FBI and the DOJ. But let's put this in perspective, okay? This is the biggest news because it is what Devin Nunes has been wanting. But Devin Nunes wants an unredacted copy. This is 412 pages. Most of it is redacted. And what's in it, any private first class in the military and NSA could have just said, well, I'm going to scratch anything that hasn't been completely in the news repeatedly so that everybody knows it. Everything else is redacted. So all you're getting here is what we already knew, except for the names of some FISA court judges, the fact that they redacted weird things, and that they actually, the person they gave this to redact wasn't very smart, because what they did is they basically showed that the only evidence that they have are the leaks that they gave out, that the FBI, DOJ, State Department, they gave out those leaks. We know exactly who they gave them to and when they gave them. So the only evidence is evidence from leaks that they produced. And the Page struck text messages show that that was institutionalized. Comey and his lawyer show that was institutionalized. He even paid his lawyer to be the leaker. So this was very, very, very clearly only the pieces of information that wouldn't hurt too bad. But sometimes they allow some things to come out so you get used to it before the bad comes out. When this document comes out and it's unredacted for Congress, it's going to put people in jail. It should put people in jail now.
Put people in jail? When are we going to see some jailing activity?
When this document is unredacted. Devin Nunes has said that this is the key document. And the others, I'm not going to quote their names, some of them are on the good side sometimes, and on the side of the war party on the other. That's the military-industrial complex, the one that runs in Congress through lobbying. But anyway, the point is that these people have now been found out, and their names, which we knew because Devin Nunes' memo had already said who had signed these FISA documents, and that's the reason Devin Nunes' memo is so damnable, because it still stands firm today. And it's many of the things that we've been saying, but we try to tell you the story as a story, not as pieces that don't fit together. Because if you read this thing, like I just did, the little bit of it that's there, you're going to see that it doesn't tell you anything we haven't already told you. As a matter of fact, we told you a whole lot more about why this is happening, when it happened, why that FISA court, remember, the FISA court permissioned the warrant. We know from the Inspector General's investigation of the FISA court before it was renewed, said that it was in complete noncompliance. As a matter of fact, James Comey hadn't even pulled any permissions to get any warrants because Clapper was allowing everyone to be surveilled. So there was no need to get a warrant on anybody. But why did they have to get that warrant? Because Comey committed 28 treasonous crimes in his attempt to do what Obama told him to do, which is stop the Republicans, and then stop Trump once he was chosen. But they knew Trump was going to win because he fulfilled the prophecy of what their own intelligence community predicted could happen and then did happen. So if you go back and you look at what we've been telling you, you'll get all the missing pieces of the information. I can start filling this in again, but in this note, in this tweet here, when he says justice in parentheses, that's fake justice. We're not seeing any justice with the Mueller investigation. If this Mueller investigation were true, we'd be seeing evidence. There's no evidence. They've said there's no collusion. They said there's no obstruction. So then what is this attempt? What was this Christopher Steele, the person who's called Source One? He gave it to a friend, that would be Glenn Simpson, who was being paid by, they don't quite mention, they mention Perkins Coie, but they don't mention the DNC, they don't mention Hillary, they don't mention John Podesta, who, by the way, as we predicted, John Podesta and his brother, Larry.
No, Tony.
Tony are getting an immunity deal. They were, after the fact, able to sign up as foreign agents because they did the same exact thing that Manafort did. Manafort's company, with Gates, with Tony and John Podesta, got it right that time, they were working for the same three oligarchs in Ukraine. Exact same thing they were doing. But no, the Podestas get off, they get immunity, and they get to not be charged with being foreign agents because they get to sign up for being foreign agents after the fact. But remember, that would mean that John Podesta was a foreign agent working for Russia at the time that he was running Hillary's campaign. Did anybody get that?
Well, that's called Russian meddling in the elections then.
Correct. And now what's going to happen? They're working out an immunity deal that anything they testify on, the Podesta brothers, they will be immune on.
This is just outright so criminal. So
they're going to testify about the DNC so that he is immune from prosecution for putting up $12 million to get Fusion GPS to work with foreign agents, British, Maltese, Russian, Ukrainian, Estonian, and some direct Russian agents like Natalia Veselnitskaya. These people were paid. They were paid for this stuff. And not only were they paid by the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, they were paid by We the People, because the State Department, they now are they're hammering on what we had hammered on from the beginning. The Jonathan Weiner, who was basically the right-hand go-between man for corruption in the State Department when Hillary was there, did the same thing for John Kerry. And they are the ones who started this whole thing. They basically created fictitious allegations, and then Christopher Steele went and reported those fictitious allegations after he received them from the Democratic National Committee through Sidney Blumenthal, who had turned in some things from Cody Shearer, which was basically a false document. And then there was the Christopher Steele false document. Then there was the Alexander Chalupa false document. Then there was Comey's false document through his research in the FBI and FBI counterintelligence. And there was John Brennan's false documents. He made sure not to have a trail. So John Brennan started the Crossfire Hurricane in July of 2016 with nothing more than a rumor that he had heard from the State Department that someone called from Estonia and said that Russia and Trump were in bed together.
It was more like a figment of his imagination.
He made sure there was nothing going back to him, and he has testified it again and again. There was no intelligence that was involved in the beginning and the starting of the Crossfire Hurricane. But then he went and reported the dossier to the Gang of Eight, a different version to each one of them, and then Comey reported it to the president, a one-page executive summary of it. But besides this, this was a plan, a counterintelligence operation against Trump. And now, why did the FISA court get involved? Because they started this in March. And what is not in these documents is the time before they were granted this in October, the numerous times that they applied for a FISA court Title I through the FBI counterintelligence department. Now, why is that important? Because they hadn't filed any in the entire time Comey was there. He was in complete noncompliance. Why was this important? Title I means that Comey, when he signed, and now we see his signature there, we knew he had, but we see his signature, means that he is 100% sure that the person that they're going to surveil in America and outside of America and everyone in contact with them, 2 levels above, upstream, 2 levels downstream, which means Trump and everyone in his team. Why was that so important? Because they didn't have anything on Trump. And so they sent him in, Carter Page, in January and February, and finally in March, he got inside of the Trump campaign by getting his name on a document saying he was part of the Trump team. And he had a document that he submitted. Strange, that document was then used in another way that is so funny, it cracks me up to think about it. But anyway, he got a document submitted, and they put him on a list. That's it. He never talked with anybody there. He never talked with Trump. He had no influence. And after, he made a nuisance of himself by going to the press and his big trip to Russia, where the press reports that he met the press. Those were leaks from the DOJ and the FBI. The press reports on Carter Page being a spy, an agent of Russia, total nonsense. Those were based upon leaks to the press. He went there, he gave a talk, he came back. He talked to 2 people while he was drinking some refreshments. That's it. He wishes he could have a contact. Let's remember who Carter Page is.
He's a wackadoodle.
He's a wackadoodle, they called him, and also a useful idiot, the Russians called him. He was used by Mueller and then Comey, and especially Andrew McCabe, in a case against Russians, a man who was working at a bank who they accused of being a spy. Well, they used Carter Page to set up 3 people. The person they got, Yevgeny Boryakov, he has to do 30 months in jail now. And the person that was basically their star witness was Carter Page. Carter Page was being used as an FBI asset and was being paid as such at the same time that they tried to implant him in the Trump team as a full-on Russian spy. Now, mind you, he was a full-on American spy at the same exact time that then Comey started with his FISA court warrant requests, saying that he was a full-on Russian spy. Carter Page didn't even know he was being duped. He didn't know the first time he was being duped and he was used as an FBI spy. He was used kind of unwittingly. And then he was used completely unwittingly against Trump. And so when it came out, when the dossier was printed, he tried to sue Yahoo News, Carter Page did, and he demanded and wrote a letter to the FBI, said he was going to reveal everything he knows. So he testified, and he also testified before Mueller. And what he testifies is basically, his testimony is also in this release that Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch got, the FISA court redacted documents for the requests for the FISA court warrants. And he basically says that's all nonsense, and he proves it. So even the material about Carter Page in this has been proven to be false, and so they've released their own document, and the evidence they have, which we all know now is false, was the only evidence that is in this document so far that we can read.
Okay, but I'm a little puzzled, but then again I'm not, because didn't Michael Horowitz review this material? And don't you always say that if the Inspector General sees crimes happening while he's investigating something, he should be reporting it?
You're going to get me way off into the weeds. Michael Horowitz is investigating leaks right now. Do you see anybody being charged with leaks when we know that right here, this document states the leaks? We know that Jonathan Weiner, we know that Comey, we know that Strzok and Page, we know Andrew McCabe, we know all of them were leakers. It was institutionalized. Do you see Michael Horowitz bringing any charges against anybody?
No,
Do you see any indictments? Do you see any recommendations for indictments for leaks?
So his job is just to make sure nobody gets outed.
Michael Horowitz is one of the worst people in Washington, D.C., and he is as criminal as Mueller. He was being set up to be the next Comey Mueller, and he would have been, as bad or worse than them. And Christopher Wray, he's in the same boat.
Well, they're all senior executive service operatives, everyone you just mentioned. So, and people go, well, where's the pattern? Well, it looks pretty evident to me. And what about Jeff Sessions? Where is Jeff Sessions?
The entire Department of Justice is compromised. Nothing good can come from it or the FBI or the CIA right now. As we have told you, and it was recently reported again, someone brought it as a glass bead game, we already reported it, Trump is using U.S. Marshals, and he's making sure SES members do not hold key positions in the U.S. Marshals.
That was really good. That was a glass bead, and not a glass bead game.
People need to have faith in the plan. It's Trump's plan. We've told you the plan. I can't keep saying it over and over because then it's going to spoil the plan. Since that was in print again, and it was on Truth News headlines, I want to address that. Do not think for a second Trump is not active. General Kelly, Trump, the intelligence communities, the judiciary committees, in Congress and the Senate, the oversight committees couldn't get these documents even redacted. It was by action of Judicial Watch. So support Judicial Watch. And Tom Fitton, he's a hero. And Larry Klayman and Chris and all those people, they're our heroes because they're doing what the government itself cannot do, what Congress itself cannot do. But when it does come, and Nunes is not letting up, we're going to see the rest of this filled in. Now, let's go back. This is a very, very complicated story. Sure. In the dossier, it says Carter Page is to receive billions of dollars from Russian gas companies. And that's the reason that the leaked story about him in Russia says he talked with a representative from Rosneft when he gave this talk in Russia, which he was only there for like a day. Nonsense. And that the money was to be shifted from Alpha Bank to the Trump Tower server. There was never a Trump Tower server. That was an ad company doing that. There was never any the Alpha Bank oligarchs have sued Christopher Steele for the lies in the dossier. And as all this comes out, Christopher Steele is going to be sued crazy. But remember, Christopher Steele was being directed by Stephen Halpern. And the rest of the British spies, Richard Dearlove, Anthony Wood, and the Alexander Downer from Australia, Joseph Mifsud, Jeffrey Patty, all these people were directing Christopher Steele. This was a British, any time that they need to commit crimes in American borders in the old days before Obama, which then after Obama it was the Wild Wild West, but before that they always used one of the Five Eyes communities. So they used Britain to come over to be our spies, to spy on us because we're not supposed to spy on us. It's an old habit. So when they say Christopher Steele was well known and had been paid many times, same thing as Christopher Halpern, someone should put the brakes on and say, why? Why, when we have massive corporate intelligence, massive military intelligence, would we ever use British intelligence? That is illegal. Using any foreign government, Five Eyes or not, to rig an election, to work against a campaign.
To overthrow the President of the United States.
Well,
and then one also has to look at what happened to JFK and the CIA and all of that. I mean, this is all one trail of corruption that many of us have lived our whole lives under.
And Comey started this in December of 2015 when they found out that the DNC had been breached, and they figured that it would soon be leaked to everyone. So they had to create a plan. And we've told you this plan over and over again. But the FISA warrant for Carter Page had to have been put in place by March because he was they tried to insert him immediately into the Trump campaign. And they gave leaks to the press that said, oh, look, Trump doesn't have a foreign policy. He doesn't even have a foreign policy advisors. And they hammered on this. And then guess what? The two people they framed, Carter Page and George Papadopoulos, who were framed by Stephen Halpern, and the Christopher Steele involved one of them, not both of them, and then there was Felix Sater and Sergei Milligan and all these other Russians who were all involved to frame these two people who had almost nothing to do with Trump. But the second that they targeted them, they did what Comey had been doing, which is just surveil everyone. So they were surveilling Trump. They were unmasking everything. And Susan Rice, these people who act as if they're innocent, the louder they scream, those rats are guilty. The louder they scream, the guiltier they are. Clapper, Brennan, Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Obama, Hillary. Oh my heavens, Hillary can't stop screaming. She was 100% the leader of this attack, and Obama rolled over and let his entire administration be weaponized for Hillary John Brennan might as well have been her campaign manager.
Yeah, but you know what? I think that the Privy Council's getting a little nervous now because people are waking up all around the world and seeing the corruption that's coming out of the Queen's Privy Council. And, you've got that Lord Conrad Black who owns all of these newspapers up in Canada and around. And he came out with an opinion piece that basically threw the American intelligence community under the bus. I think that they're throwing that out as ballast to try to keep their ship moving.
Absolutely. They're very, very nervous. Now they're saying it wasn't the Russians, it was the British. But it wasn't really the British. It was our own weaponized intelligence agencies hiring the British. We paid them to do this. We have the proof.
Well, of course, this is a little more complicated, but let's go into the next tweet. Looking more and more like the Trump campaign for president was illegally being spied upon, surveillance, for the political gain of crooked Hillary Clinton and the DNC. Ask her how that worked out. She did better with crazy Bernie. Republicans must get tough now. An illegal scam.
Let's look on that bottom part first. Republicans must get tough now. We now can see that the crimes were committed. If the Republicans don't do something about this in the Congress, they're not Republicans. We're
going to tweet them out of office.
They
All we have to do is wait for President Trump to give a tweet at their election time and say that person's no good. And then we'll be voting for the other one.
Now, let's go backwards to the statement before that. She did better with crazy Bernie. Okay. Crazy Bernie and the primaries, they said in front of the court, yeah, they were rigged, but we have no obligation to even be honest about the money that we received for Bernie, nor to give him any of it, nor to run a serious campaign, nor to even consider him as a possibility, even if he would have won the entire primaries. They said this in court. There is no provision that the Democratic National Committee has to do anything. There's only one person, because it's written this way by a lawyer, Perkins Coie probably. Only the head of the DNC is culpable for anything that the DNC does, and that was Debbie Wasserman Schultz when the WikiLeaks came out showing the fantastic corruption, the fantastic rigging against Bernie, the fantastic theft, the fantastic Federal Election Commission financing fraud with Soros, with what we now know, Bill Browder, which we've always been saying, Oleg Deripaski, with Leonid Blavatnik, and all of those Democratic donors who made donations illegally, you see. And that's why everybody says, let's get the DNC server. It's already been wiped, folks. But if you could have got it in the old days, you'd see why Seth Rich was killed. Or at least he disappeared. He was outed. He was gone. No matter what happened to him, whether he was killed, whether he was spirited away, I don't know. But I do know he disappeared when he went from the campaign side. He was mad that they had basically ripped off and defrauded Bernie, and he went over to the money side and saw what was going on there. That's when he probably took the information, and or the Alwan brothers took it, Imran Alwan, because he went over to work for Debbie Wasserman Schultz after he was kicked off Capitol Hill for 12 crimes that he is yet to be even investigated for. The Inspector General said he committed them. He got all the evidence. Nothing happened. So what was going on the DNC server? It was also connected to Hillary's server. The same person who ran the DNC server ran Hillary's server. So what was really going on? This was far beyond just them ripping off Bernie. Bernie got money from Soros. Okay? Sorry, Bernieites. That's the reason he's still screaming. That's the reason he's getting out of his lawsuit. He has a nice new house. He's driving a nice new car. He can't stop his campaigning. And now he's turned from being a Democrat because he read the Intelligence Community's report called Paradox of Progress, and it said that if you go as a Democrat far left, you have a chance of winning. Hillary didn't go far enough left. Bernie was put in there to bring in all the far left, and then you get dumped. Bernie then capitulated after 17 primaries were shown to be rigged and thrown for Hillary. He threw in the hat, but now he's still campaigning. Think that through, folks.
Well, that's his job. His job is to get the far left all riled up for him, and then he exits and says, well, vote for Hillary, and then Hillary can, get all the votes.
Precisely, and it was rigged exactly for that, because his people, when they found out that he'd even been locked out of the DNC server, they brought a lawsuit against him and then didn't prosecute it. When they were ripped off for $84 million, They didn't prosecute for it. 17 proofs. 17 times they had absolute proof that those elections were rigged. He did nothing. So what is Trump saying? Well, you tried to do the same to me, but you didn't win. And he's also saying, and he didn't use the word wiretapped, and he put surveillance in parentheses because you're supposed to read wiretapped, because Robert Hannigan came over from Britain, from their national security agency equivalent, to our headquarters of the NSA and literally physically wiretapped Trump Towers. That's a fact. That's a known. That has been given in testimony. Now, and it's a fact because Admiral Rogers said that he was so disturbed that John Brennan had made an agreement with his equivalent. Rogers is the head of the NSA at the time, and when the head of the British NSA comes over and sets up surveillance on Trump in Fort Meade, his own Fort Meade, that was the takeover of the CIA of the NSA, and that's where the battle started. That's why the Inspector General investigation of the FISA court came, and a total audit requested by Admiral Rogers, and why Admiral Rogers went to Trump Towers and told Trump he was being surveilled, and Trump moved out of there days later. And Admiral Rogers is not being prosecuted. He doesn't have to be out there screaming all these things that the guilty ones are screaming because, yes, he knew what was going on, but he was being ordered by the president. He's a military man. He could be court-martialed for not doing so. But in the end, he did the right thing. He went to Trump and told him the truth. Do not trust your intelligence community. Now, that is what is really being said here in between the lines. It was not only a scam, but if the Republicans don't stand up and say this was illegal and this was an attack on the election, this is an attack of Democrats on Republicans using outside foreign agencies as well as a weaponized Obama administration.
And not Russian. Let's make it clear.
Correct.
This is British interference with American elections.
Yeah, the Russians did very little. It was blamed on them, but that's because Michael Alperovitch has all of the crypto keys, so he can let anybody in he wants, and his son, Dmitry Alperovitch, always comes in to make up the lie about what the cyber attack was about after his dad gives out the crypto keys. Folks, I don't know how many times I have to say this, that no one simply goes and arrests these two people, because these two criminals can easily be proven to be the criminals that they are.
Next tweet is a quote from Andrew McCarthy. Quote, I said this could never happen. This is so bad that they should be looking at the judges who signed off on this stuff, not just the people who gave it. It's so bad it screams out at you, close quote. On the whole, FISA scam, which led to the rigged Mueller witch hunt.
Now, that last statement was added on, of course. McCarthy has to come out now because he has to act like he's a Republican. And what does he say? I said this could never happen. In other words, you were a Democrat. You were an anti-MAGA. That's what you are. And now you have to come out because Jim Jordan has already said all this was true. And you said it wasn't true. Couldn't have happened. After Nunes's memo said it did happen. So what do you have to do? You have to eat crow. You have to eat your words because otherwise you're not even going to be in the running for anything. Because you have been an obstructionist. You are just like the rest of the Republican obstructionists and all the people who want to stand in the way of MAGA. So all I can say is it's a little bit too late when you start coming out with your alibis at this stage of the game.
The next tweet is a quote from Pete Hegseth on Fox News. Quote, source number 1 was the fake dossier. Yes, the dirty dossier, paid for by the Democrats as a hit piece against Trump, and looking for information that could discredit candidate number 1 Trump. Carter Page was just the foot to surveil the Trump campaign, close quote, and then Trump tweets in capital letters, illegal, exclamation point.
Calling again for anyone with any justice in their heart instead of fake justice, or anybody with any integrity that is a Republican that can vote to actually impeach Rod Rosenstein now. Impeach Jeff Sessions now. Impeach and basically fire Robert Mueller now, based simply on what we have as the redacted document. You could wait until you get the unredacted document, and then you'd have evidence to fire a lot more people. But It's illegal. It's clearly illegal. And the only thing is that this, when it says source one was the fake dossier, wait. No, source one was Steele, Christopher Steele. He merged the entire weaponized Obama administration and every foreign agent they could, smear anything they had on Trump into one dossier. That's what source one was. And Christopher Steele came over and he kept telling the press all about it. And then finally, he accidentally gave a copy to somebody, and they printed it, BuzzFeed.
Accidentally?
Well, that's because it lost his contract. And mind you, it was Christopher Steele's testimony that supposedly got the FISA court warrant, because he said, I was so concerned as someone who's worked for American as a spy, as a British spy for so long, and I hated Trump. And he says his animus towards Trump is just astounding. And he was talking not only to Jonathan Weiner, but also to Bruce Orr and other people, Victoria Nuland, and then John Kerry. Remember, they came over and reported to the State Department, so the State Department hasn't even been fingered in this. We fingered them from the beginning. Jonathan Weiner's expose in the Washington Post, the op-ed. Just go back and read that. He came out, gave his alibi. He told the whole story. He said how it was all fake, and then how John Brennan picked it up and ran with it and created the Crossfire Hurricane, but how Comey had already started it long before. Comey was the one in January that started all of this. Read our 28 treasonous crimes of Comey. I'm ready to make it like 56 now, because there's just so many more crimes he's committed, because he's acting with what? He has immunity.
But the worst thing is they were very close of this all happening, and our lives would be a lot different now than they are if these people had been successful in overthrowing the United States government. This is treason, and it's not just by Comey and Mueller. It's by a lot of people. And I want to see us start using the word treason and start looking at what those ramifications are. No matter how big and ugly it is, we have to stop this so that we can go and live our lives under the United States Constitution the way it is written.
You can put lipstick on that pig, but that pig is still treason. And just as you say, the evidence is here now. We see it. You can't be a guaranteed Russian spy and an FBI asset working against the Russians at the same time. So Carter Page was just the foot to surveil the Trump campaign. Oh, much worse than that. He was sent in to surveil. That's so they didn't tell him that. He was going in as a willing spy to destroy the Trump campaign. And Felix Sater was another one of these FBI Russian assets that was also interjected into the Trump campaign. George Papadopoulos was then framed the second that they knew that he was going to be associated. And we have all this evidence. We have the Brits. It was in the British newspapers. They bragged about it on the news all the time.
And we need to look at the crimes that the media has committed because of this. Not only have they covered this up, they've actually put this out as truth.
Oh, and they've mixed it all up so that they've confused everyone except a few people. And I can literally say, there are only a few people in the news, in any news, anywhere, that is properly reporting this. And I want to also reiterate that even some of them didn't get elements of it that we have pointed out. And I want to point out this again.
Well, for example, Conservative Treehouse, which we enjoy reading, but early on they said that Michael Horowitz was a white hat and he was coming in to save the day. I haven't seen any retractions of that yet. I don't know if that's still their point of view.
For instance, there are people who say that, and they're stupid. But Peter Strzok, okay, he said he didn't have anything to do with it. He ran the dadgum thing. He testified with FBI lawyers supporting him that he had nothing to do with the dossier. That is such a lie. He was the one who even went over and interviewed Christopher Steele there. He went over and interviewed the agent Michael Gaeta. He was the first person. When Michael Gaeta received this fake dossier in Italy, it was Peter Strzok right on the spot. Now, I want to point something else out. Why is it there's only one FISA court request being looked at? That's because that was the domestic Title I. How about the Title VIIs? How about the ones they would have had to have done for George Papadopoulos? That would have been done by John Brennan. So when John Brennan says there was no intelligence That's to keep you from looking for a FISA court warrant where he gave bogus intelligence to start the Crossfire Hurricane. If you started an investigation of Carter Page and you didn't get a FISA 702 on him, that would be stupid. Impossible. And it's been hidden the whole time. Why? Because Brennan is the dirtiest dog out there. He even tricked Clapper. And between Brennan, who was trying to hide that he was behind the whole thing, let Comey try to hide behind the National Security Division, the counterintelligence division of the FBI, tried to let Kerry and John Carlin and Jonathan Weiner and Victoria Nuland, they were all hiding behind national security issues, as we predicted they would do. But for them to have done those operations against candidate Trump-elect, President-elect, and President Trump, they would have had to have that. Plus, think of this. They only got the warrant October 16th to surveil Trump from October to November? No. This had nothing to do with seeing if there was Russian interference in the election. They only had this warrant technically for a very short period of time. And at that time, Comey came out and said, the Trump Tower server, that's not true. He came out and debunked that. Because he knew that the oligarchs were coming after him. So Franklin Furrow's report in Slate news agency was all fake. That was paid for by Comey. Felix Sater's accusations against Michael Cohen, that he had tried to write a letter that Michael Cohen was going to give to Trump to say stop the sanctions on Russia. This is all about stopping sanctions that Obama put on Russia. But Obama didn't stop Russia from doing anything. He was in bed with them. So the whole concept of Russian collusion is about Russian sanctions or Trump being paid off. What I want to say is, after looking at what we saw that Tom Fitton and his great people over there at Judicial Watch were able to get, show me a speck of evidence, one tiny piece of evidence. Please, show me any evidence in any of this with collusion, with obstruction, with anything to do with anyone on his team with Russia, with George Papadopoulos, with Carter Page, with Sam Clovis, with any of them. Show me a speck of evidence, please.
And you know what? It's the taxpayers are paying for Mueller's fantasies, and I want to put a stop to that. I'm tired of paying for this.
One other thing. What were they after? In this, it says they were after the compromised material that the Trump team wanted on Hillary. Okay, wait a second. Christopher Wray said he had all of that. Why would that be anything that could compromise Hillary? We already knew all the compromised material because it came out in WikiLeaks. For heaven's sakes, we had Comey himself come out and tell us that Hillary committed jillions, hundreds of thousands of crimes, security crimes, okay? We didn't need any compromised material. Trump didn't need compromised material on Hillary. That's just plain stupid. And did he ever use any compromised material? No. So the setup, the framing that they always tried to do with anybody was, come on in. Now, admit to us, you have compromised material on Hillary. Oh, you don't? Well, then we'll get it for you. And then when we give it to you, you'll have it, and then you can say you have it. That's what they were trying to do. That's the crime. That's just plain stupid. So it is being ignored in the last tweet.
Well, let me read the last tweet. I have a great meeting with Putin, and the fake news used every bit of their energy to try and disparage it. So bad for our country.
In other words, let's just call them the war party. Anybody who said bad things about Trump with that slip of the tongue on a very complicated issue of collusion and obstruction and meddling, which he was addressing all at once, is basically just showing they're part of the war party. That's what I'm going to start calling them. I often call them globalists, but they're the war party. They get so upset if they think war is going to end.
Well, that's how they make their money.
Absolutely.
And this is going to hurt their pocketbooks.
And
their job is to kill people and use things that they can purchase and repurchase and make to kill people.
The Bushes killed 1 million people in Iraq.
Well, yeah, and not to mention all the folks in 9/11 right here on U.S. soil were killed by the war party.
Covered up by Robert Mueller
Yes.
to this very day. Obama, in 7 countries, dropped over 200,000 bombs and killed 2 million people and put 58 million, or they now say 60 million refugees homeless. And what did we do about that? This is the war party. Why would anybody ever allow that? Why would Congress ever allow that? Why Rand Paul and supposedly Bernie, the only two people, and Trump standing up against the Iraqi war with the Bushes? Why? It doesn't matter what party it is that wants war. The Congress is always for it. Have you ever noticed that? Those people got to go.
In fact, they want war, and they bypass this thing that Congress has to pronounce that there is war. They just have war.
Now, let me point something out that is really ironic. The UN wants to take away everybody's weapons and have nothing but peace. And how do they want to do it? Through war. The UN peacekeepers, which they've never done anything good.
They're the war makers.
They're war makers. They're rapists. They basically are destabilizers, and they're basically working for economic terrorists. So the globalists have just the rhetoric that says that the UN is going to create world peace through globalism. No, it's not. No, it's not. Trump's going to create world peace through American dominance, not by war, and dominance economically. War crumbles under economic pressure. Matter of fact, you usually go to war because you have economic pressure. And who finances it? Central banks and people like Soros and Rothschilds and Rockefellers and Warburgs and Kuhn Loebs and the Goldman Sachs
and the Privy Council.
And the Privy Council and the Golden Shares. And yes, those are the people who totally go for war. Both sides. They support both sides because why? They have their money vested in those companies. And every time you go to war, they make money. And that's why they promote it. So if you say peace, they freak because then their career political life is threatened. And when that happens, these are vicious, mean people, most of whom have never held a job in their life. And all they've ever done is lie as a politician and play the two-party, bipartisan nonsense, which is really a one-party, war party globalism in the last decade or so, or since basically George H.W. Bush declared the New World Order was going to happen, whether we liked it or not, out of the United Nations, and then used the United Nations resolution to go to war with Iraq without the Congress ever approving it. And then his son went to war because he just said he knew. He walked out of reading a book about a goat to some children, and he went to the podium and he declared war on Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Well, Al-Qaeda wasn't in Iraq, folks. And somehow he knew. He walked out after having someone speak in his ear for seconds. He walked out and he knew who committed 9/11. And he went to war with them at that moment, at that podium that he had his speech prepared. That's because Robert Mueller and Dick Cheney and his dad and the Vulcans had to get their Durham Brady bonds back into the market without crashing it, because that's what they used to bring down the USSR. Anyway, that's that's the tip of the spear of what happened at 9/11. We're not going to get too deep into, but we've written reports on it. So the point is, Trump has pointed out that even this redacted copy of the FISA warrant demonstrates illegal activity that either you as Republicans stand up and fight against, because these were mostly Democrats who did this. A few of them were Republicans, like, we won't go into that, but they're fake Republicans. And if the Republicans don't stand behind this, then do not reelect them in the 2018 or 2020 election, because Trump's going to be reelected. And if they're just going to be resistance and obstructionists, it doesn't matter what party they are. They got to go.